Well, hello everybody. Thank you for joining us. Um, as I said in the chat, I meant to say at the bottom of the hour, not the top, but live is live, right? So, today we are going to be streaming with LaunchDarkly, and we're going to have some fun playing around with LaunchDarkly and IBM Cloud and AWS. So, I'm going to bring my buddy Chris in here. Chris, hi.
Hello, how's it going?
Wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I'm not sitting in the same room that I usually sit in when I do this kind of thing. So hopefully the light
Oh, it's
behind
fine.
me isn't too bad.
It's fine.
I had to pivot this morning and go from wireless to wired, which I'm not used to doing. So I'm a little off my technology game this morning, but not in a software way, more in a hardware and
Never
just
forget. It's what is it? What do they say? Uh, Copper isn't dead. It's just buried or something like that.
I like
Something
that.
like that.
That's a Halloween joke right there. I like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got a few people watching. If you wouldn't mind throwing some plus ones to say that you can hear us and everything's coming in growing great into the chat to make sure before we kick off and go any farther, that'd be great. We'll wait for that to happen. But while that's going, Chris, how about you introduce yourself? Tell us a little about yourself.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, my name's Chris Leon. I'm with LaunchDarkly. I'm based here in Kansas City, and a little south of Kansas City. And I'm pre-sales solutions engineer. Love working with customers of all sizes in this sort of the Middle West, like I call it,
Mhm.
middle part of the country. Um, and yeah, I mean, I've got prior to that, I've done 20 years of like technology. Boy, it's really hard to say.
Yes.
But yeah, I've been doing software development and management and leadership for a long time in the world of engineering. And so it's my people, man. I absolutely
Mm.
love working with developers and, doing stuff like this. So just came back from KubeCon.
Hmm.
And I know we locked eyes at one
Yes, we
point
did.
from our booths, but we didn't get to spend any time talking together, and I'm really bummed about that. So I was going to
Yeah.
ask you, how the hell are you doing?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thanks. Yeah. It's KubeCon was a whirlwind. It was an interesting situation. But it's really funny that our booths were literally like one away from one another, but we still never got to actually sit down and talk. Um, but yeah, no, it was good stuff. And by the way, if I haven't introduced myself actually officially, so hi, I'm JJ, and I'm a developer advocate for the IBM Cloud. And Chris and I are going to be playing with LaunchDarkly and a multi-cloud situation here. So we one of my rules is we want to do things as quickly as possible and not just hear us yap on forever. So Chris, you want to bring up your approved 3 slides and kind of
Yeah.
show us what we're planning on doing. And then
Oh,
over the next hour ish, we should get this all built.
yes, man. I hate when people tear into slides and they've got like 20 slides.
No,
Um,
three. Three is the
yep.
max. Three is the max.
Yep. 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 Okay. So let's get this going. Do my whole window, and with any luck, um,
All right.
you'll see some tabs, lots of tabs.
Perfect. Yes.
Awesome. Well, yeah. So, I mean, I thought we would just kind of get started with, I mean, for the audience, for people who don't know anything about LaunchDarkly or even feature flagging, and which I'd be surprised if anybody in this audience doesn't know about feature flagging. We could talk about, a little bit about LaunchDarkly and how, the kinds of problems that we solve. And then I didn't want to get into like a real rudimentary demo. I wanted to go more to, something that more developers are interested in, things like cloud migration. So I've got a little story to tell on cloud migration. It's just one slide. And I'm really, really proud of it because I put some animations in there and they're really
Nice.
dumb. So we can't escape that slide. And then, yeah, I'll get into how I used, this was a really fun thing. I actually played with the IBM cloud technology for the first time, and I thought it was great. And so I wired that up with some other stuff, and we'll get into that in a minute. But that's kind of where I thought we would do today, is just
Yeah.
kind of talk about it and go from there.
Perfect.
So, okay. Yeah. So feature flagging and LaunchDarkly. So to get started with LaunchDarkly, so we are a feature flagging platform, if you didn't know that already. And it's super easy to get started with LaunchDarkly. So we are very developer focused, very developer friendly. I say this all the time in demos, and it's true because I've actually played with the SDKs and working with our APIs. But everything you can do in the UI, there's a backing API for it. Simple. It's really a very rich environment as far as the APIs go. So to get started, it's super easy. All you do is install an SDK into your app, and there's tons of SDKs. I saw Lua on there on the list the other day, and it caught my eye because there was a time I really kind of wanted to play with Lua.
Mhm.
I had this weird hankering to be a game developer or something like that. Like
Did you
Lua
play
can do all
World of
kinds.
Warcraft?
I did play World of
Yeah,
Warcraft
so that's where the Lua comes from, because that
for
was the all that stuff was written in Lua. All
yes,
the interface was. Yeah, nice, nice.
yeah. So what about you? What's your experience with World of Warcraft?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, me and my wife played for many years together. That was actually one of our bonding things.
Oh,
She
cool.
was so much better than me at it, though. Like just so much better. And I tried, and she just she in essence picked me up and carried me along with her as she played the game better. I also chose like a rogue as my first character too, which was, if you know anything about World of Warcraft, um, that is not a beginner character. That
Yeah,
is not a
yeah.
beginner character.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's like if I remember correctly, all the add-ons and plugins were Lua, which was one of the coolest parts about it because it was really, really extendable. I tried learning it myself, and I was like, yeah, no, I'm gonna go back to my Python world and my Ruby world, because that stuff actually makes sense to me.
Yeah, man, I agree. I kinda had a similar experience with Lua. I looked at there's that. I kinda always wanted to learn Lua, and Rust. Rust is
Oh,
another
cool.
one I always thought was kinda like, why don't I mean, you look at these, like, trending languages. I mean, this is all relating back to SDKs, but you look at these languages and different companies publish these trends, and for a while there, it seemed like Rust was really taking off, and I don't know if it is anymore, but, I feel it's probably
I
out now. It's probably a Golang and things like that, but
I have this book literally sitting on my desk, and as you can see, it's never been actually opened because I haven't broken it, because the spine. Mainly because every time I pick this up, I'm like, as much as I want to use this, as much as I want to learn how to do Rust, I just don't have the cycles to do it. Like there's just so much here that I'm like, come on. But it's actually there's dust on it. There's actually dust on this book.
Might be a little dust on the is that the Rust Bible?
Or the Rust programming, yeah, like it's the initial. It's like it is the book on Rust, or at least when it was released. I don't know if it's true now anymore, but I have some
Mm,
friends in the Rust community that they swear by this stuff. They really do.
yeah. I hear great things, but, well, anyway, whether if you're using Rust or, Ruby or Python or Lua, or even if you wanna, put feature flagging into a Roku app, we have
Oh,
an
cool.
SDK for it. So, yeah, now we say that all the time, but I've never actually heard of anybody doing it, but, it's there if you wanna use it. So you put this SDK into your app, easy, everybody does
Mhm.
that. And then you have to this is kinda where the development work comes, where you have to kinda decide in your code, like, what is a logical sort of boundary point around a feature? And a
Okay.
feature could be anything to anybody, but you kinda have to find these decision points where it's like, "Okay, I could, execute this feature as it is, or I could create a variation of this feature and execute that." So you have to find these decision points where you can sort of if you had a launch darkly, you could tell the code, go this path rather than the original. Uh, and that's just a very simple example, but sort of just as sort of it within the code, sort of a routing point, do A or do B. So
Yeah.
you find these decision points, and you have to you would introduce calls to our SDK in those decision points, and you'd make references to feature flags, the key of a feature flag, and then LaunchDarkly is going to return to you what should you do at this point, and so then you can in your code you can decide from there which execution path to take. Um, and then so
So
you go ahead.
can I ask a
Sure,
tangible
sure,
like thought experiment here?
yeah.
Let's say we have an API, right? That just we have a create API that creates something on another end, and then I spun up a delete version of that a delete endpoint to that API. Would it be better to put LaunchDarkly around the delete like endpoint, or do I put it inside of like a portion of the delete endpoint that actually like does the delete, like it just outputs a bunch of stuff? Like where is that decision point? Like how granular can you get with this?
Oh, that's the question. And I hate this answer, but I'm
It
going to give
depends.
it depends. Of course,
Yeah, yeah.
you saw it coming a mile away. But yeah, it depends on what you want to make available to the caller, what flavor of that feature you want to make available. So if it's the inner workings of delete that are going to vary by some criteria, well, then you would wrap those sections around a feature flag. If the
Mhm.
whole damn thing is we're only going to let certain people even call this delete API, or this delete endpoint of the API, then yeah, you would do it at the outermost level, right? You would make
Got it.
that sort of your decision point, if you will. Um,
Can you have
eh,
multiple? Like I have
oh,
like the
sure,
big feature, and then I have like a gating mechanism, if you will.
absolutely, yeah. I mean, you can go
Nice.
nuts with it. You can, and we'll get into that a little bit in the cloud migration example. It does take some thinking through
Okay.
what again those boundaries. Where do we introduce the different flavors of our behavior? I mean, a lot of people kind of I think what we see is a lot of decision points, if you will, or the boundaries, if you will, are sort of like they kind of line up with like either a development task or like a user story. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm,
or a piece of the behavior in your application. It's going to behave this way. And I know that might be broad or, maybe kind of generic statement, but again, I'm trying to put as much
yeah.
context and color into the word "it depends" without saying the word "depends." So yeah, you have to kind of decide on your own where these points are. Um,
Nice.
but you go into LaunchDarkly and you create all your feature flags and you create all that criteria. This is where you would
Hmm.
set up things like if the user is JJ, then return true. If it's Chris, return false, or
Okay.
whatever other information about again, about a user. And again, we'll get into what a user is, but most people think of user as a human being.
Hmm.
It's characteristics about a human that I can say, if they have these things, do A. If they don't have these things, do B,
Yep.
or C, or D, whatever. Clear as mud, right?
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay. Slide number one. And then, okay, we talked about SDK. Hey, we don't even need this slide now because we already talked about SDKs. Okay, so you can forget this one. I still get two more slides, right?
Yay.
Okay, so the architecture of this thing. So the way that this works is you can think of us as like feature flagging as a service. Feature
Okay.
flags as a service. So on the left, this giant toggle here kind of represents LaunchDarkly, right? This is where you go in and set up all your rules, all your segments, your experiments, all the stuff that you want to do for feature flagging. And then over on the right, we have your application. So
Hmm.
it could be like you mentioned, it could be a sort of a server application or an API. It could be a front end. It could be a mobile app, a native mobile app, whatever is able to use our SDK. That's your application. So it's this thing. Um, when you go into LaunchDarkly and you toggle something or you change it, that change is pushed down to your application, to the SDK. It's because we set up a streaming connection between your application and LaunchDarkly, and we use server sent events. So it's not WebSockets. It is a one-way streaming connection from our server to your SDK or to your application,
Okay.
and we push that down, and then the SDK is aware of that change, and it can inform. We give you a bunch of hooks and things like that that you can use in your code to respond. That hey, here's the current value of a flag. The flag just changed. Here's when it changed. Here's what it is now, and you can respond accordingly. Usually, that all happens within 25 to 200 milliseconds, so it's super fast.
Hmm.
Um, we go over a global CDN. So this is anywhere and this is a global benchmark, 25 to 200 milliseconds. We tested this out all over the world, and we have a global CDN that allows this to happen. And it's as far as your application goes, the overhead is super low because the biggest hit that it takes is at the beginning when you initialize and you pull down that initial rule set from LaunchDarkly, and then everything after that happens in memory. So there's none of this like round trip phoning home.
Oh,
Did the flag change? Did the flag change? Did the flag change? You don't have to do that. It's just you're working with the flag states in memory until they change, and then again it's pushed down, and then the SDK and the feature flagging as a service takes care of syncing up the value, so you don't have to worry about that.
nice. Yeah,
That's the architecture. That was slide number 2.
yeah, absolutely,
Um,
absolutely.
so there we go. And that usually I would pause for questions at this point or any kind of feedback. But is this making sense? Is this
Oh, and this
good?
is yeah, perfectly, perfectly. And
Okay,
we don't have
cool,
any questions yet in the chat. I'm keeping an
cool.
eye. That's why you see my eyes dart around, is I checking all the different monitoring, make sure everything's coming in good and all that jazz.
Sounds
Being
good.
producer and someone on the actual show is always challenging.
Got
Always
all the
challenging.
got. I vision you. I actually can't see you right now because I've got you
There
minimized because I'm sharing my whole screen. I imagine you've got like all these levers and stuff. Anyway,
you
um,
go.
all right. So moving on to real world, right? So we talked about the architecture. We talked about KubeCon a little bit. Wanted to talk about like a common use case we get is cloud migrations. Because a lot of times people want to go from their legacy system to the cloud. Um,
Yep.
and they tend to follow. We tend to recommend sort of a common like cloud migration, like a playbook, right? There's a template, if you will, a common approach. So, and it starts with planning, right? You kind of decide which apps you want to move. Now, I know I said Azure here. I just noticed that. I'm sorry about that.
It's all good.
Fill in cloud du jour, but or certainly IBM Cloud, which is what I used when I did this. So we'll see that in
There
a
you go.
minute. But you plan out your app. You figure out like, okay, which apps, and then you go there and you sort of look at how am I going to do this, right? I mean, is it going to be a massive like migration? Are we going to refactor along the way? Or are we going to do some, you're going to keep half of the app 1 foot here and 1 foot in the cloud? How are we going to do this?
Yeah, yeah.
And they start building it out. We tend to recommend like sort of feature by feature. Like I say here, it says piecemeal migrate features and functions. And the cloud really works great for this. Actually, things like IBM Cloud Functions, which we'll get into in a minute, or AWS or Azure, they've all got these little serverless functions that we
Mhm.
can use to migrate pieces of behavior one at a time and test them out. And but that action right there is where we really come in. Is where you need to decide. Oftentimes you may have something like a routing layer in your application, like
Mhm.
maybe a service bus or services tier or something like that. That's just routing messages. And if you don't, you could build something simple that supports a cloud migration. That would be you could use feature flagging to drive the whole thing. So that's what my example is going to show. But it's super easy. So it doesn't really matter what cloud vendor you're on. Again, it kind of comes back to the SDKs. As
Mhm.
long as the technology that you're building that cloud functionality out in, um, we have a SDK to support it. You can take advantage of the feature flagging to help direct traffic between legacy and cloud.
So let me ask a well, you might go over this in the actual cloud functions portion, but now that you're talking about it, it kind of spurred this thought. So we all know the beauty of cloud functions or serverless in general is that it scales down to zero. Um, that means the application is not running, right? Or whatever the function is not running. You mentioned that the state is kept in memory. So does that mean every time your function spins up, it calls home to see what needs to be, what feature flags need to be flipped, and then keep state until it scales back down to zero? Or do you see what I'm asking? Like that SDK is that significant overhead to the function? Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, it
Yeah.
seems like it has to call home a lot if it was leveraging serverless.
Yeah, and so what we give you at LaunchDarkly is there's levels of segregation between or organization, if you will. So we've got
Okay.
and I probably should have had a slide for this, but at the top level we have what we call a project, and a project can be analogous to a product in your environment, and you can have as many of those as you want. We see teams do, like they'll have a one-to-one between a LaunchDarkly project and an actual software product that they make. Some teams will create projects that house just things like operational feature flagging, or
Ooh.
not, I won't say configuration, but maybe things that are less, that are more like feature flagging used in steps that it takes to initialize the application or to build it or to test it
Okay.
versus
Sure.
runtime, post initialization. So you can create as many of these projects as you want. And then within a project, we give you what we call an environment. So you
Hmm.
could have, JJ's, and you could have, Chris's IBM Cloud demo would be the project, and then we could have JJ's environment, Chris's environment, and you have, as many environments as you want. Um, when your application initializes to the question about the overhead, you give it a key, and that key would map to an environment. So if you have hundreds of thousands of flag, which maybe not a very good idea to have hundreds of thousands of flags defined in one environment, then yes, it's going to pull all those 100,000 flags in. But typically people would have feature flags organized in such a way that there is, I mean, yes, you do have to pull down all the flag definitions, but they're scoped just down to that environment. So it's not like you're pulling
Ah,
down the entire world or the
got
entire
it.
organization every time you call a function.
Got it.
You can scope it based on how you've organized LaunchDarkly, and then every project and every environment, these things have unique identifiers that you can use to say, give me the
Sweet.
keys for, or, yeah,
Yeah.
give me the flags for just this piece.
Nice. All right. I'm with you. I'm with you. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yep, yep. And we'll get into some of the. I love getting into the technical details of how I built this thing out, because I learned a little bit too as doing this about IBM Cloud and about how it works. And this thought came across my mind too as I was building this out. But it's really fast. I'm really surprised in a
Okay.
way how fast it is. I mean, I only have a few flags that are defined in this thing, but it really works. So. I guess
Perfect.
I shouldn't be surprised, but I was more delighted. Let's call
There
it
you
that.
go.
It was my first time working with this thing that it worked.
Nice.
So okay, so let's set this thing up. And okay, this is my fourth slide, but this is the
That's
animated
fine.
one. So this is
Yeah.
the fun one.
Okay.
Okay, so let me tell you a little story here. So I call this the intercloud intergalactic feature flagging demo, because we're going to use LaunchDarkly, we're going to use IBM Cloud, and we're going to use AWS in this demo.
Perfect.
So here we go. So what we're trying to answer. So let's say we're doing a cloud migration, right? We've got some legacy. Whoops, I keep bumping my laptop. We've got some legacy code, and we're moving that to the cloud. Okay. And let's say that in our migration, we have a function whose job is to tell the rest of the application, you should use this version of the API
Hmm.
or this version. So I built out an uh, an IBM Cloud function whose job is to just do that. So what it's going to do when we call it, it's going to return this little chunk of JSON, which is just the version number 2 in this example. And 2 means cloud, and 1 means legacy. 1 is legacy, 2 is cloud.
Okay.
So in this little example, it's saying, hey, you need to, you're calling me, you're asking me which version of this API should you use. I'm telling you should use version 2. And just for demo purposes, by the way, I got that from AWS. You don't need to know that, but I actually, the source of that version number came from AWS. We care about that in the demo. You'd never put that probably in a real app, but it kind of makes it more visible that way.
Yeah.
So in this function, I've introduced a LaunchDarkly feature flag called API source. Okay. And this is a multivariate flag. And a multivariate flag is not just a true or false. You can create multiple values for it. So I've created 2 values for it, and this is a string value, a string AWS and a string IBM. And we can create other things out as we need it if we have other, cloud platform, other
Mhm.
destinations, or other places we want to route to. Because this is a routing function. Is really all this is.
Okay.
If we in our code, if we're using the AW, if LaunchDarkly is configured to use the AWS variation, then this demo API version is going to call a Lambda function, and this
Okay.
Lambda function also has a feature flag. So it's got one called Lambda API service, and it's going to return either version 1 or version 2. That's what I'm going to toggle in LaunchDarkly.
Got
And
it.
it's pretty simple. It's just a little Python. There's your Python.
Hmm.
And I also built another IBM Cloud function. It's super dumb and easy, simple. All it does is return version 1. That's it.
Sure.
So if we get IBM from our LaunchDarkly feature flag, then we're just going to call that function and return version 1. And then there's other, you could take this to the nth degree if you wanted to. This is just simple, but you could have, Google or Microsoft or whatever it is as you need. That's my
I
last
like
slide. That's the
I like
setup.
the animations. I gotta give you props.
That's
These were
it's,
very
it,
very good animations. Very good.
blows minds every time. It's like, how did you make that appear? Like,
There you go.
I literally did nothing. I just dragged. I might have dragged and dropped something. Can never
Nice.
drag without a drop.
Very good.
So okay, so that's the setup. And sorry that was maybe a long-winded setup, but
No, it's perfect. It
hopefully it was
just seems
worth it.
very cleanly straightforward, which is what we want because we want to see the awesomeness of being able to do the Launch Darkly toggles, but we're talking to two totally different clouds with two totally different infrastructures to work with
Yes.
when they all glue together. This is great. I
And
love it.
again, I'm gonna try to keep the sales speak as low as possible because I hate that too. Oh god, it's annoying. But the value is
Hey.
I can do all this without having to make a bunch of coding changes.
Mhm.
And I know that sounds salesy, but you and I have both, I'm sure, been in weekend deployments. And I mean, Saturday, we got to wait till Saturday night at 2 a.m. to push this code because that's the best time, the lowest traffic or whatever. That sucks, dude. I mean, like,
Mhm.
why not just set it and forget it so it can toggle this to go to run some other code
Mhm.
and I can go do other things at 2 in the morning on set. I mean, I just don't have time to do that. So, and not anymore.
So
Yeah.
so before we get to the code, one last question. Obviously, this is version 1 and 2 for the Lambda API service. If
Yes.
I was going to deprecate version 1 completely and just stay with version 2, do I pull LaunchDarkly out of my application or do I leave it in there and just kind of never change it?
Right. So in other words, is it going to be a permanent flag
Yeah.
or sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Transitional kind of flag or like
Yeah.
a temporary. Um, yeah, it's up to you. I mean, we give you, so let's take that one at a time. If you wanted to
Mhm.
make it, if you wanted to leave it in there, uh, certainly isn't going to hurt anything. You could
Sure.
always, you could make it always return, I can't remember. Did you say version two? Version two. Um, and in your code, you have what the ability to create, enter in when you're writing the actual code itself, which I can bring up a code example.
Mhm.
But you can tell it what the default value is. And so
Ah.
that's useful for if for some reason your when your app initializes, it can't reach Launch Darkly. We get that question a lot. Well, what happens if Launch Darkly goes down? You know, that's the first line of defense, if you will, is that default value. So it won't even if it can't get to Launch Darkly to pull down, or if it can't find it that flag for maybe fat fingered the key or something like that, and
Mhm.
it's not in your local application's memory space, it's going to default to a value, and you can
Okay.
configure you can set that. Um, or if you take it out, then there's the risk. Okay, well now I've pulled this out. Um, where does this feature does this is the same feature flag in other places? Is if taking it out here, do I need to take it out over here? Where is this feature flag even referenced? We give you the ability to what we call code references,
Mhm.
creatively named, that tells you
Mhm.
everywhere in your application where the reference to that, in this example, Lambda API service, where that's the name of the flag. Where are we
Mhm.
using this flag in your code? And we'll show
Nice.
you here are all the places that you would need to go, either take it out or set that default value in the code. Or in Launch Darkly, which I'll show you here in a minute, you can make a flag a permanent flag, which
Mm.
means it gives it a certain status, if you will, to where you get different like indications about when you're trying to archive a flag, it won't let you because it says, "Hey, this is a permanent part of your application,
Got it.
and here's the default." So you might want to be careful. I mean, it can an admin can go in and can change these things, but you can't just delete permanent flags out of Launch Directly as a
Nice.
safety measure. So.
Awesome.
So yeah, I probably beat that up enough. So let's move on to the actual demo.
Perfect.
So where I started with this is over here on the left is this demo API version. So here's my IBM Cloud console. So I have this. This is basically my routing function. And if you remember
Mhm.
from my my document here, it has a LaunchDarkly feature flag in it. So when I was diving into IBM technology, I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to create a node function or a node application, and I've got my main and I've got my params and I've got all my work here. Okay, how do I use LaunchDarkly? How do I pull in the LaunchDarkly require, right, or the import? Oh, so I realized that there's a whole other set of steps you have to do that. So I created a Docker image, and and then I uploaded it to Docker Hub, and all it is preloaded with the LaunchDarkly APIs available, the SDK rather. So it's got the Node.js SDK installed in it, and maybe one other thing, but it didn't have anything to do with Node. I think it was maybe a promises library or something like that. I can't remember what I
Okay.
put in there, but so this before we got started here, this was at 16. So a few other people have been messing with this.
All right.
So I built this out. People can use it if they want. So then I took that Docker image, and then I went to the IBM Cloud command line and created my action and said, here's what I want my action to be called. Here's the image, and the image already had my code in it, with for my routing function in it, and here it is, and it created it, and I ended up with this, and it says runtime Docker, and it's got some other stuff. But if I click on this thing, so it's not going to show me the code because it's telling me I can't see that because it's in a Docker container.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I could invoke it and I could test it, and this was actually pretty useful as I was building this out and testing it out and everything. I would kind of sort of alternate between using this debugger invoker, if you will, and the command line tool, because you can do the same thing from the command line, which is pretty handy. So I'd kind of go back and forth. I don't need to show that now, but so I built out this function. Let me take a step back here. And then the other IBM Cloud function is API version. I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this thing.
Oh, that's an impressive application right
That
there.
is amazing stuff.
So good. So good.
Isn't it crazy how essentially one line is doing, like, if you could call this work, assigning a value, and I've made it go stretch across 4 lines because so let me ask you, are you a one-liner kind of guy when you develop code like this? Do you put it all in one line, or what's your approach?
No, because I know when I write anything, I write it and I'm in the code for really like a good small amount of time. And then I put it away and I don't come back for like maybe possibly weeks later. So I make sure that my stuff is so verbose and so like open and not one line so I can just read it like a book and remember what I was trying to do. And as long as like I know we're supposed to do red green refactor, right? I do red green, ship it.
Off your plate, right?
Yep.
Get it out of here. Yeah.
So Fuel Sneb just said, give me a second here. It sounds like they're in the same camp that I am. Multi-liner is absolutely fine.
Yes.
Because I mean, you got to read it, right? Like you got to. Yeah. Anyway.
Now, I have been accused of kind of being that guy who might come in here and consolidate some of these little statements down to one line. I don't know, probably just on a whim. No great reason, just how I'm feeling that day. I'm like, oh, now I feel more sophisticated. The computer doesn't care.
You got to get your T-shirt for Hacktoberfest somehow.
Exactly. Yeah, and then it ends up just making my code look scary.
Yeah, there you go.
Anyway, yeah, well, no more dad jokes, I promise. Okay, so this is super dumb and simple. It just returns version 1, like we saw from before. Zooming out. So if I run this thing, if I run my the routing function demo API version, it's just I'm just showing the output. It just returns AWS and
we can't actually see anything.
Uh-oh.
We just see actions. We don't see whatever you just brought up.
Oh, I need to share my whole window. Hang on a minute. This is my first Twitch stream.
It's all good.
Your first time is always awkward, and
you're doing a horrible job. Horrible job. You should never do this again.
Oh man, you might be saying that later.
All right, here we go.
Okay, is that better? Can you
Much better.
see? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Okay, so yes, so this is how you run this function, demo API version. This is what the caller would get,
Got it.
source. So
Mhm.
it's telling us, hey, you need to use version AV number two, which is cloud, and I got that version number from AWS. Now, okay, so we can change that whole thing by using LaunchDarkly. So here is that feature flag that I mentioned before. This is what lives inside of that IBM Cloud function, my routing function. It's called
Mhm.
IBM Cloud API source. This is the feature flag. So there's the key. You know, you can
Mhm.
just copy this and paste it into your app. Right now it's off, so it's returning the default variation, which I made. Uh, well, it's just AWS. So I can change that if I toggle this on. Um, and save my changes. Let me do a quick plug for LaunchDarkly again, because remember we mentioned the 2 a.m. Saturday morning scenario.
Mhm.
If I wanted to have this change that I'm about to make happen while I'm asleep, I could just schedule it. So you
Oh,
could go in
sweet.
and you could say, "Hey, I want this to happen again tomorrow at 2 a.m. or whatever it is," and it'll just happen. So I don't have to be here to push the button. And
Nice.
if you really need to, you can request some kind of approval first to say, "Hey, I gotta change this routing function, to use this and not that. Is that okay?" And you can indicate an approver and describe your change, and the change will automatically happen. This will automatically toggle after they approve it once you've
Nice.
requested it. So it's kind of in their it's their problem at that point.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm not going to do either of those things. I need to schedule or approve it because I'm the master of this demo environment. I'm God in here.
Yay.
So I mean, if I was a benevolent God, I would put in a comment saying, it's describing what I do, but I don't need to tell anybody what I'm doing. So I'm going to save the change.
Mhm.
So now, I've got IBM as the value that's going to come back from this feature flag. So now I'm telling it, hey, use IBM. So I'm going to refresh this, call it again, and boy, it better say IBM. There it goes.
Nice.
There it goes.
Nice.
And if you remember from our stupid dumb the code we were laughing at, it always just returns one, so you can see one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, so that's cool. But now let's put it back to AWS. Save my change, toggle it, and I'll rerun it. And AWS is telling it to use version 2, which is cloud. Well,
Mhm.
I remember I have a feature flag in there too. So I'm going to, just to show the capability that this can work in any cloud, I've got this Lambda API service, and
Mhm.
that's where this is coming from, AWS. So right now you can see it's returning version 2. It's
Mhm.
saying use version 2 of our API. I can toggle it and save my change. And now it says, oh, nope, use version 1.
Got
Tell
it.
the code to use version 1. So if I refresh this, I'm going to be embarrassed if it doesn't say 1, but I'll be a hero if it does. There
Nice.
it says version 1. So there we go.
Oh, cool,
So,
man.
so that's I mean, it's very simple, and there was a lot of wind up to get there. I recognize that, but it's really simple in terms of how you can change the behavior of this thing. You can schedule it, you can do it
Mhm.
live, and it can go across cloud, and it's wonderful. And that's
These are
that's my
these are
story.
all just serverless functions that now putting in the SDK of LaunchDarkly, you have the ability to, for lack of a better term, reroute your code to what you want to be live at that moment.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Exactly.
That's
And,
so cool.
I, I didn't quite get this isn't quite kitchen sink status because we had Docker in there. We
Mhm.
had IBM Cloud Function. We had AWS, the Lambda function. I always feel like I need to throw in a couple more things to make it so unrealistic that it becomes a kitchen sink kind of demo. Or I've thrown everything in. I couldn't think of anything else to put in there. So we're left with just something really simple, but it
Yeah,
works.
but that's great. Like sometimes the best demos are the simple ones because it just shows the power of it. Do you mind bringing up our the little animated diagram again?
Sure. Yeah.
Just kind of there we go. Perfect. So when you flipped that switch on the API source, oh no, sorry, the Lambda source, that's what changed it from version 1 to version 2. So you were that deep into the code for per se, or deep into that pipeline. That's not a pipeline. What is it? A Rube Goldberg machine? It's a Rube
Yeah,
Goldberg.
yeah, I like
you,
that.
you're that deep into it where you flipped just that, not having to worry about anything upstream because you
Exactly.
just wanted to flip. that one portion of the application.
It's probably a different team working on that other thing, and
Absolutely.
I can toggle that, and I can go work on something else. I don't have to be there to babysit it and see it through and be on a call. And I know I'm describing, these maybe fictitious scenarios, but it happens, man. You get on these stupid calls where you've got like 100 people on there, and it's like,
Ugh.
we just got to deploy this one thing, and it takes all these people to do it. It's pain. So didn't have to do that.
You got that crit sit where you have your VP listening in and they're like, why is the website down? And you're like, I just want to deploy a new version of Passenger. Oh, I have to get 7 people to approve this. Come on. When we could have just had literally what you showed here, gated that section of our code, and we could have just turned it off, not having to worry about that change in Passenger. Anyway, not that I've lived that life or anything.
No. That's, I don't know where you read that, but that never happens.
Yeah,
Never
happens. Awesome. Well, I want to open this up to the audience.
Sure.
If you wouldn't mind, if you have any questions or thoughts, please throw them into the chat. Otherwise, I mean, we've told the story, and I've seen the question. If I'm just a developer and I want to just play with LaunchDarkly, what's the easiest way for me to get my hands on it? Or do I need to, like, is there a tier that I can just play with?
Yeah, you can get a trial. And the trial is almost everything that everybody, it's almost the entire platform. There's a couple of things that are missing, or not missing, but they're not enabled in the trial version. For example, single sign-on is one of those sort of enterprisey features.
Sure.
Some of the integrations too, like ServiceNow is an integration that has to be sort of enabled, but that isn't a typical kind of like getting started use case though.
Chris, if I'm an open source developer using ServiceNow and I want to just play with this, first of all, I need to go find you and buy you a beer because something went seriously wrong in your career path.
Oh boy, that I'm sure ServiceNow is, well, I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to say that in my encounters with it, I'm not man enough to have to be like an administrator. Those people, I have a lot of respect for them because it's the power. It's the power. I can't handle the power.
True. And if I'm just a simple open source developer wanting to play with something, yeah, I don't have to worry about single sign-on or ServiceNow. I just want to be able to throw the SDK into one of my applications and actually see that it flips that bit that I need to get that new feature out. And so it's just a trial. What's the trial? How long is it?
It's 14 days out of the box. And, if you want to, we're not, giant jerks about it. We work with people and, if you've got some really good, high, sort of high impact use cases for you and your team that make a huge difference for, I say go big or go home. If you've got like a big release coming up, and it's going to take like a ton of people and everybody's weekend's going to soak up all their time. Why not? Some people would see a lot of risk in that. At least maybe to a lower environment, you could try feature flagging it. Absolutely. And prove it out.
It's just one of the better practices, as much as I hate to use that term, to leverage feature flags, because that allow, especially in this cloud native ecosystem, that we have constant changes, things being pushed out. It's great to know that you can have this gating mechanism of LaunchDarkly to push out portions of your application in an intelligent manner, to be able to have that confidence for your executives to be like, no, we can just we can turn this on, see if it does what we expect it to, and if we really hate it, I can hit this button and we can turn it off and figure out what just went wrong. And that's a comfort blanket to any executive I've ever heard.
Yeah. And, one thing we didn't get into a whole lot is the targeting, because what you just described is a scenario where, oftentimes we don't want everybody to see everything. We want to release a feature. We don't want everybody to get it. That's what we have now in a lot of deployments, where you deploy something to a server, and because the code is there, the whole world, everybody in the world gets it. There's no sort of like filtering down, if you will. And so that's where the targeting comes in. So we didn't spend a lot of time on it, but there's a lot of options you have in the feature flag itself to define what do we serve up AWS or IBM to a user, and you can create an infinite amount of criteria that has to be satisfied in order for the one version of that flag to be returned, or another variation. So the targeting is just as powerful and useful and as just the ability to kind of have a kill switch.
Absolutely.
It's the kill switch, but with criteria.
Yes. So great. So great. Well, we're not getting any questions, so we were going to
What?
end it. Yeah, it's because the demo was so perfect. Nobody has
Come on,
anything to ask.
I've never ever been told that about one of my demos.
There you go. Well, I mean, now you just got to take this demo on the road and show off IBM Cloud more places. Yeah.
Hey man, I tell you, I felt like I earned some kind of like engineering badge by playing with it, because uh, I leveled up a little bit. I didn't know anything about it before. I played with it, and I'm like, hey, this is fast. I mean, you saw it run. I mean, it actually runs really fast. So I was impressed.
And Vesnuts really did just, bottle up the whole conversation. This is pretty neat tech, which is the best thing you can get off of Twitch right there. Somebody is just like, this is just great. So cool. Well, thank you, Chris, for sticking around, and I'll go ahead and end the stream here in just a second. And do you have a contact, or do you have a preferred way for people to contact you?
Yeah, you can my email is just cleon@launchdarkly.com. Send me an email. I'm on LinkedIn. You can reach me there.
So let me throw this up real quick just so we have it. Did I get that right?
Perfect.
Perfect.
If people want to reach me in sort of a non-professional way, I'm on Twitter, just my name @ChrisLeon. I'm on Instagram @ChrisLeonKC. Yeah, there's I mean, I don't take all that stuff all that seriously, so it's not going to have a lot of LaunchDarkly out there, but it's more just kind of personal stuff out there. So give it a look.
Perfect. Well, thank you for joining, or thank you for coming, I guess. And everyone, thank you for watching. This will be up on YouTube after the fact, so if you did miss it or come in late, it'll be on YouTube, so you can just catch it there. And we'll be posting this on Twitter and whatnot, so show it and share it and all that jazz. So any last words, Chris?
No, hey, I was going to ask you if you're going to reInvent, or if you're maybe not necessarily reInvent, but like, what's the next conference you're going to? So maybe we'll actually be able to hang out a little bit.
I don't actually know, but we will find a path and cross that path somehow, somewhere. And
there we go.
I owe you a beverage at least to say thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. That'd be great.
Right. Say bye, Chris.
All right. Thanks, guys.